Sonata Arctica, their brand new album, The Ninth Hour. This band that is oftentimes thrust upon many new fans of power metal, really seen to be as a very good influence on the modern age, considering they themselves are rather modern as well. They themselves having influences from such as Queen or Stradivarius. They themselves who did not come and rise through the first wave with bands such as Gamma Ray, Halloween, as well as Blind Guardian. But Sonata Arctica, this is an important album for them, considering their last one, Pariah's Child, was one that was conveyed with mixed reaction. It definitely had some praise that was garnered its way, but some questions also emerged from the SA camp of fans. So, The Ninth Hour has a lot to prove, and this is an 11-track affair that spans roughly 66 minutes. Most of these tracks are going to hover between the 4 and 6 minute range, with one keynote exception, that being the 10-minute and 13-second long 10th track, which is the second part of the White Pearl, Black Oceans, a series of songs, the first song of which was released, well, a number of albums ago. So, what does SA bring to the table? What makes them different? Why do they call themselves melodic metal as opposed to power metal? What do they have against that genre name, you might be wondering? Well, it's based around something really simple and stupid. They feel it's easiest to write, melody, so they're melodic metal. I like it whenever things are very simple and to the point. I'm sure a lot of people are like, well, actually, no, that's just wrong. Even though it was said by a member of the band talking about their own band. But this is a group that shows that in its diversity and in the way in which it balances things. There's an approach that is sort of delivered on a Sonata Arctica disc that has that sort of, draped all over it. And Closer to an Animal and On the Fault Line, which is Closure to an Animal, those are the two bookends of this album. I go with that specifically for a reason, considering Closer to an Animal does undulate a little bit between some of those two sides that SA really shows quite a bit, but it's one that instead feels a little bit sort of middle of the road. This is not a strong opener, but at the same time does sort of get you equipped enough for your journey through a Sonata Arctica album that you can sort of get what they are a bit about. This is not a band that necessarily wants to floor you with speed here in 2016. They don't want to have that traditional stereotype, that super gallop that power metal oftentimes garners as, like I said, a stereotype of the subgenre of music, something where that speed showcases itself all the time, and that proficiency with instruments is seen as the most important thing. Instead, this is a band that opts to take a step back a little bit. They aim to really blur you a little bit more with songwriting and, once again, with melody, as they said. They are a melodic metal band. So, Closer to an Animal does have enough melody to go around, but it doesn't feel like it goes very many places with it. It's one that instead opts to sort of hover within that safe zone of its own melody, and as a result, it feels like a very middling track. It doesn't feel like a strong opener, and instead, like I said, it feels like it just prepares you for the journey to come. Now, Life and Fairy Tales start to exhibit another duality that SA really has going for them here in 2016, and that's the fact you can go with a Closer to an Animal style approach, and then you also can hover to the softer side, and there is about a 50-50 split at times, it feels, whenever it comes to slower material and more upper to mid-range material as far as speed is concerned on this album. It's not an aggressive album by any stretch of the imagination. There are a lot of times where they really handle things a little bit more slowly. They let that emotion sort of run through. They're trying to imbibe something very personable within the track. It's one that's supposed to be a little bit more from the heart, and while Life's chorus is, well, it's pretty corny, Fairy Tale does sort of take you to that, strange place. It does offer enough of a sort of fantasy feeling to it with its musical construction that it does earn its title. And this track at 6.5 minutes also spans a little longer than the traditional SA track on this disc, so it does have a little bit more of a ranged motion to it, giving it a little bit more of a kinesis, which is very positive for sure. Whenever we get into We Are What We Are, Till Death Done Us Apart, we start to see some of that lower end, that slower register, that ballady register, as some may call it, and if you do, that's your prerogative. I think that that's absolutely fine. It's something that just hovers more so along the emotional slower, and think of what Gethsemane by Van den Plas was, and then apply it to other things aside from Jesus being in the garden, and you kind of get a little bit of an idea of what we're talking about here. These are tracks that are a little bit slower, but that heart and that sort of emotional drive is what does keep you sort of captivated a little bit within these songs. And this, at this point, is an album that is a bit more about captivation and about sort of sealing you in than necessarily trying to blind you with speed and, proficiency. It's instead one that uses, once again, that melody to try to create and craft advantageous songs of different speed and different caliber, different shapes and different sizes. Does it always work? No. At times it feels a little tedious. It feels like there is the balance that they sought is actually quite imbalanced and leaves the listener wondering what side of this band they are going to encounter with the next track. Considering we have two tracks of slower distinction back to back, it makes you wonder, is the next one going to be quicker, or is the next one going to hover amid that same idea? I have to talk about Rise at Night, though, considering this is where the stereotype of power metal really does get a lot of its color, I suppose, considering that bustling opening, that very speed-oriented opening is what you traditionally have gotten as far as a power metal stereotype probably for about 10, 15 years, really for a long time. I remember that being a prominent stereotype whenever I was first getting into heavy metal, and that was, I'm old, shut the fuck up. But this is also a really good track considering it does break some of the monotony and does break some of that confusion. It is a nice little dive into that. And there is speed on some of these tracks, but it is not sort of the center point. Instead, they're aiming to collectively deliver a sort of mammoth opus that just feels like it's not quite reached that level. It doesn't feel like it ever does really reach that level, which is a true shame because there is some pretty good material that this disc really delivers, and one such is White Pearl Black Oceans Part 2. This is a 10-minute track that showcases why Sonata Arctica should be handling a lot of longer pieces such as this on a constant, because they have a tremendous ability to really write with poise and also write with a lot of recognition. They do have enough subtlety to their changes, and they do have enough prominence to their storytelling ability to really drive home a lot of important views, but while also maintaining your focus and maintaining your interest. This is a 10-minute track that honestly works better than some of the 4 to 5 minute songs that you get in the sort of clustered middle portion of this album. This is one that works on a lot more real levels than some of those do. On the Fault Line is a softer version of Closer to an Animal, considering it's called Closure to an Animal, and it's kind of an odd choice. It's an odd duck whenever it comes to a finale. I would have ended it with a 10-minute track. I think that was a great sort of send-off, and this here just feels like you were trying to, fulfill the bookend theory or the bookend idea because maybe you couldn't, you just wanted to do it. I don't know. It's just one that doesn't feel like it fits very well. Both the bookends on this album feel very frayed, and some of the stuff in the middle feels very rough around the edges. The soloing is decent. The percussion work is pretty well done. It handles its job very, very well. The vocals are a bit mid-range. This is something where I don't see anything or hear anything that is positively exuberant or excellent, but nothing here feels bad, if that makes any sense. Overall, kind of an average album. It's one that has a lot of glistening potential, but it doesn't always kind of go full tilt boogie on that. I would give it a 78 out of 100. Definitely an album to still scope out, especially if you are a fan of Sonata Arctica. That is obvious, but if you're a fan of power metal or melodic metal, this might be something to examine to give you a real frame of mind as to perhaps where this is at in 2016. I want to know what you guys think about the Ninth Hour by Sonata Arctica. Please let me know in the comments below. I am coverkillernation, and I'll talk to you guys next time.